Don't make me think is the most important thing that you should consider when making your site or app.
Hi there, my name is Imali and welcome to my design channel.
I am going to share 8 lessons that I wish I knew earlier as a designer based on the book Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, and I'm going to add a bonus point at the end. Lesson number 1, which is the most crucial and also the title of the book, Don't Make Me Think, is the most important thing that you can do to make your site or app easy to use. So what does Don't Make Me Think mean? This means that everything that you design should be self-evident or self-explanatory. Users do not have the time to try and figure out how things work on your site or your app. If a user is coming to your site to buy an item, the process of buying that item should be very direct and clear to the user. They should not spend time trying to figure out how to add the item to the cart or how the checkout process works. Everything should be clearly spelled out. As Steve Krug, the author of the book, puts it, your job as a designer is to get rid of question marks. In this context, question marks refer to everything that would make a user to stop and wonder what steps they need to take in order to complete the goal that brought them to the site. These questions burden the users with unnecessary cognitive load that make it highly unlikely that these users will stick around. So it is important to make sure that your site is easy to use so that people don't have to spend a lot of mental energy in order to get what they want. Lesson number 2, the book covers 3 facts that you should know in order to design effective web pages. First, people don't read pages, they scan them. When people go to a site, they're not going to start reading from the top to the bottom of the site. Instead, they're going to scan through the site to see anything that matches what they're looking for. Second, we don't make optimal choices, we satisfice. There are 2 basic ways of making decisions: maximizing and satisficing. Maximizing is when we try to make the very best possible choice, and satisficing is when we make a choice that is just good enough, all things considered. Lastly, we don't figure out how things work, we muddle through. Building on the previous points, since a lot of us are satisficers, we don't take the time to figure out how things work. We will just muddle through until we find a solution that is just good enough for what we're trying to do. So now that we know these facts, how do we design sites and digital products that work effectively without needing to make people think? This is what I'm going to cover in Lesson 3 to 8. Lesson 3, format things to support scanning. As we mentioned earlier, people don't read, they scan. Therefore, when you're designing your site, make sure that it is scannable. Some of the things that you can do to make your site scannable include using a lot of titles, keeping your paragraphs short, using bulleted lists, and highlighting key terms. Let's look at this example. The page to my left is not scannable because it's just a block of text, while the page to my right is highly scannable because we've used a lot of titles, we've used bulleted lists, and we've also kept the paragraphs short. Lesson number 4, break pages up into clearly defined areas. Breaking up a page into clearly defined areas not only makes the page more scannable, but it also helps the users digest the content more easily. You can break pages by using different colors for different sections, or even using section dividers, among other things that will clearly distinguish different sections within the page. Using the same example as before, people would prefer to use a site that looks like the one to my right, which has clearly defined sections, compared to the one to my left, which is just a block of text. Lesson number 5, take advantage of conventions. We are creatures of habit, and therefore we expect things to work the way we are accustomed to. Therefore, when designing digital products, stick to conventions whenever possible. For example, when someone sees the front arrow, they will expect that arrow to take them to the next step. And when they see a back arrow, they will expect that that arrow will take them to the previous step. Don't try to change the convention by making the front arrow to indicate moving backwards and the back arrow to indicate moving forward. This will confuse and frustrate your users and make them take actions that they were not intending to. So stick to conventions whenever possible. And in situations where you have to break conventions or introduce something that is new to your users, make sure that you add more information to help the users know what to do. Lesson number 6, create effective visual hierarchies. There are 3 things that you should remember when creating visual hierarchies. First, the more important something is, the more prominent it should be. For example, the main title of a blog should be H1, which is usually a bigger font and a thicker font weight, compared to the subtitles, which can take H2 or H3, which are usually smaller and thinner font weights. This is because the main title is more important than the subtitles, and therefore it should look more prominent so that users know that this is the main title, and the ones that are less prominent are the subtitles. Second, things that are related logically should also be related visually. For example, we can see here that everything in the pricing section is under the same color, which makes it easier for users to know that these things are all logically related. Lastly, things should be nested visually to show what they are part of. Using the same example of the pricing section, we can see that everything related to pricing is nested within the pricing section and does not spill over to the frequently asked question. Because if we did that and had some things from pricing spill over to the frequently asked questions, it will be hard to know which elements belong to which section. Lesson number 7, make it obvious what's clickable. It is very frustrating when you cannot figure out what's clickable and what's not clickable when you're navigating a site or an app. Here are some things that you can do to make it obvious that something is clickable. Number 1, underline clickable text so that users know that this is something that they can click. Number 2, use a different color for clickable text to distinguish it from non-clickable text. Number 3, use buttons that stand out so that users know that they can click the buttons. Number 4, use the hover effect to change the appearance of clickable elements when a cursor touches those clickable elements to indicate to users that those are links that are clickable. Number 5, use icons like arrows to indicate clickable links. And number 6, use descriptive text like click here to indicate to users where to click. Lesson number 8, eliminate distractions. As we've mentioned earlier, people have low attention spans, and therefore eliminate any distractions that will take them away from their intended goals when they came to your sites. The book covers 3 types of visual noise that creates distractions. First, there is shouting, where everything in the page vies for your attention. Then we have disorganization, where things are all over the place in no particular order. And lastly, we have clutter, when a page has too much stuff and it looks crowded. When designing a site or an app, you should do your best to remove all visual noise so that everything is direct to the point. Before adding elements to a page, ask yourself, does this element need to vie for the user's attention? Is this element organized in a way that is logical and easy to understand? And is this element necessary for the user to complete the task at hand? And if the answer to any of these questions is no, then perhaps that's visual noise that needs to be eliminated in order to remove distractions. Now that we've covered the 8 lessons, here's an important bonus point that I'm sure if you're a designer who's worked in a real-life project, you can totally relate to this bonus point. In a perfect world, you'd be able to design sites and apps that follow all these design best practices. However, in the real world, design does not exist in a vacuum. You'll be working with a diverse team of engineering, marketing, salespeople, and other stakeholders whose goals may differ from the goals of the users who are going to use the site or the app that you are designing. Therefore, in real-life situations, you'll have to make certain trade-offs. For example, you may want to design a site that creates a very straightforward user experience, but the sales team might decide to propose certain items to be added to boost sales, even if it means potentially diverting users from the goals that they had when they came to the site. In these situations, even though you know certain design best practices, you'll have to make certain trade-offs in order to meet some business goals. So while it is good to know the best practices that are covered in this book, in real life, you'll have to make certain trade-offs. So if you've not read the book, Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, I highly recommend that you get a copy of this book because there's so many more lessons covered in this book, including accessibility best practices and mobile design best practices. If you found this useful, you can also sign up for my Substack, where I will be sharing regular design lessons and resources. I'll put the link in the description.